I woke up to the soft whir of machinery and a ceiling that looked like it belonged to a sci-fi movie. For a heart-pounding, disorienting moment, I wondered if I had drifted back into the realm of dreams. However, the dull ache radiating from my ribs quickly yanked me back to reality. I'd been in a coma for 3 whole months, though my first realization upon waking wasn't the doctor's soothing voice or the comforting presence of family. Nope. Just an eerily empty hospital room, the kind that would make even a ghost feel lonely. On the bedside tray lay a folded note in my dad's handwriting. 5 words. Just like that, the world shrank to those words. We stopped paying. Good luck. I thought my life had hit rock bottom, but oh, the universe had other plans for my downfall. As I lay there, the nurse whispered the tragic news later, and I wept quietly, like a faint rain instead of a raging storm. Time turned into a blurry smear as I fixated on that note, each reading blurring the ink. Those 5 words haunted me like an old ghost at a poorly planned Halloween party. Dad's handwriting was so neat and precise, the same script he'd used to endorse bonuses for people whose names didn't register on my radar. This clean, calculated scrawl was not the same as the tender, affectionate touch of the man who once pumped my fists in the air while parading me around our Seattle street. With every passing second in that sterile room, I began to feel the heavy cloud of silence wrap around me, thicker than any medical equipment. Silence had always sent shivers down my spine, a harbinger of doom in my house, a prelude to emotional hurricanes. After Mom passed away when I was 18, that silence turned into a language that my stepmother, Veronica, became fluent in. She never needed to yell, she played a deadly game of chess with people's emotions. A simple turn of her head left you feeling as invisible as an afterthought. Dad absorbed her energy, like a sponge but less enthusiastic, while my brother Landon paraded around mimicking her, draping the coldness of our home like a new jacket. I took my place as the ghost in that family drama, the one who filled every silence with work. For 15 long years, I toiled away, constructing systems that were my lifeblood but remained nameless to most. Proposals materialized under my fingers while Landon dazzled everyone with rehearsed charm, tapping my shoulder as if he had just awarded me a solid gold star. Isn't family great? Meanwhile, my makeshift office was practically a storage unit masquerading as a workspace, with flickering lights and a chair that wobbled more than I did during family gatherings. Despite all of this, I told myself it didn't matter if my name went unacknowledged. As long as the work glimmered with quality and the truth sparkled brightly underneath, I was fine, right? But lying there, every breath feeling like I was inhaling fire, I began to grasp the crushing understanding my mother must have had in her final days. She foresaw the S. My heart raced as the door clicked shut, and a shadow slipped inside. For a ridiculous second, hope bloomed, like some ill-fated romantic comedy. But, alas, it wasn't my father, it was Daniel Price, my mother's estate lawyer. He had a soothing demeanor that didn't make my chest feel like it was being crushed by a lead weight. Following him was a stranger in a sharp suit, his posture radiating an air of someone who meticulously assessed every corner of the room before stepping inside. His eyes skimmed over me briefly, strangely knowing, like he had read my life story in one glance. Daniel eased into the chair next to my hospital bed, his gentle approach almost reminiscent of someone comforting a frightened cat. "I'm glad you're awake," he said, promisingly, though it felt disconcerting since it wasn't my family huddled around. My voice croaked out, the urgency in my heart was obvious. "Where's my family?" The silence that followed screamed louder than a chorus of sirens. I saw the tightening of Daniel's jaw and the stranger's sympathetic glance. My gut already told me, they weren't coming. Clearing his throat, Daniel shifted the focus back, surprisingly calm, and introduced me to the man beside him, Ethan Ward. "He's been advising on certain matters regarding your mother's affairs," he explained, and I felt the air thicken with something serious, maybe alarming. Ethan nodded, expressing a sense of solemnity that didn't seem quite right for a hospital room. Then he dropped the bomb, "I'm here because the next 72 hours will determine your future." I blinked, grappling with confusion, nibbling at a flimsy thread of hope. Daniel's slow exhale prepared me for some heavy news that was on the brink of tipping the scales. Your father is planning a complete restructuring. He intends to remove you from all strategic authority. Those words spiraled around my mind, my pulse raced. I hadn't even had the chance to flaunt my authority. How could they take that away from me? Ethan's expression was unfazed, oddly collected. That's the point, he said, like he was reading a script from a dystopian movie. Just when I thought I grasped the situation, Daniel produced a stack of papers from his briefcase, each page carefully clipped like they held the world's biggest secrets. He turned over the first page, and I caught my breath at the words, "Richard filed documents declaring you mentally incompetent. Permanent." It felt like my heart plunged from a high cliff. I glanced at Ethan, who leaned in slightly, delivering a message filled with ferocity wrapped in calmness. He thinks you're powerless because you're lying in this bed. The weight of Daniel's words hung heavy, resonating like a thunderclap. Your father made a mistake, he asserted with an undertone of fierce determination. I felt stranded, utterly unable to respond, processing the reality that my father, with an ink-slick motion, could dismiss my existence. But then Daniel unveiled another layer. My mother had foreseen this whole debacle and drafted a trust. My breath hitched at the thought. Ethan stepped closer, excitement pulsing through his stiff demeanor. He clarified a crucial detail: abandonment during medical incapacitation. If my father withheld any form of support while I was unable to defend myself, all that my mother controlled would revert to me. Suddenly the tension inside me shifted. It was like a long-dormant flame flickered alive. Hope mingled with the adrenaline coursing through my veins as the prospect of fighting unfolded before me. The battle for my very existence had just begun. Daniel tapped the papers lightly, setting the stage for what felt like a courtroom drama. Your father signed the refusal of medical responsibility 2 weeks ago. We've got the note he left beside your bed. That right there satisfies the condition. We stopped paying. Good luck. Those 5 words had shattered me an hour ago, but somehow, they were piecing me back together. I found myself thinking of the tangled mess of assets I had to manage. Ethan exchanged a knowing glance with Daniel, then shot back with blunt clarity. Nearly $1 billion in combined holdings and voting control tied to your mother's shares. With that statement, the hospital room tilted not from weakness, but from clarity. For the first time since regaining consciousness, I felt my spine straightening against the pillows. My father thought he'd put me 6 feet under, but in reality, he'd dug his own grave with this move. But Ethan was quick to add, a trust doesn't erase perception. The board still sees you as that girl stuck in the converted storage office, taking care of back-end tasks while no one paid attention. Ouch. The truth stung like a bee. They won't accept your authority on trust alone. You need proof. You need a plan. As Daniel neatly closed the folder, I realized this was emergency mode and we only had 72 hours before the summit kicked off. I swallowed hard. My body felt like a feeble sack of potatoes. I can't even walk across the room, I protested. Not yet, Ethan reassured me, a twinkle in his eye. You just need access. And like a magician revealing his trick, he pulled a small, heavy object from his jacket pocket and placed it next to me. A security badge. My photo. My name. This was my mother's doing, and it sent a rush of adrenaline through me like a caffeinated jolt. She had it made years ago, Daniel remarked with a small, sad smile. She wanted you to have full access when the time came. She trusted you to do what she never could. Staring at the badge, its edges glimmering in the dim hospital light, I realized I wasn't powerless after all. I had simply been asleep, but now woke up with purpose. The suite that overlooked downtown San Francisco suddenly felt alive with city lights flickering like signals, beckoning me back to life. While still perched on the edge of my bed, Ethan plugged his laptop into a secure terminal that Daniel arranged. The screen glowed ominously, bathing his face in a blue light as streams of access logs cascaded across the screen. My mother built this, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the mechanical whirs around us. Every line of it, Ethan replied confidently. And she left every door open for one person only, you. Grief, pride, and fury braided together like a tight knot in my chest, forming a cold resolve. Time slipped by as we gathered evidence, a digital treasure trove of payment records and task logs showing how I had completed workflows that Landon had stolen as his own. Hours melted away like ice on a hot day, and Daniel stepped out to make phone calls, leaving Ethan and me with a charged atmosphere of quiet focus and electric potential. You know what's going to happen when you walk out there, right? Ethan asked, but his eyes were glued to the screen. I couldn't help but smirk. It was time to show them my comeback. I know exactly what's going to happen, I replied with steely confidence, finally locking eyes with him. Good, he nodded, a half-smile creeping onto his face. They've underestimated you for years. Don't give them a second to recover. With our mission clear and my resolve hardening, I felt the walls of doubt crumble around me. It was time to reclaim what was mine, and I was ready to rock this boardroom showdown. By dawn, the war room transformed into a chaotic mosaic of sticky notes, frantic printouts, and intricate diagrams, a volatile cocktail of betrayal and truth. At the nucleus of this chaos, my mother's trust clause lay circled in glaring red ink. 72 hours had morphed into a blur of meticulous preparation, strategic coordination, and quiet moments, where I could almost feel her presence, urging me, don't shrink for them, Maria. Late nights coding together at her desk and the wisdom she gifted me echoed around the room, sharpening my resolve. On the morning of the summit, Daniel waltzed in first, primping his tie like an overzealous waiter. The board members are ready, he announced, almost puffing out his chest with pride. But they won't budge till you're here in the flesh. Little did Richard know the storm brewing on the horizon. Good, I shot back, sliding my badge into my pocket. He didn't deserve any tip-offs from me. As we descended into the hotel lobby, I could feel the electric buzz of executives and reporters, a swarm of faces that had previously ignored my existence. Just another day for my family, huh? Navigating through the crowd was like trying to swim upstream in jello, with Daniel and Ethan flanking me like two stoic bodyguards. Just when I thought we were going to float into the main hall unscathed, a figure in a crisp navy uniform blocked our path. It was Martin Cole, the head of security, and I felt a shiver. He shook his head, sensing Daniel's tension. I'm not here to stop you, he assured, his voice calm. I'm here to deliver something important. With an outstretched hand, he offered me a well-worn notebook, pages creased and filled with meticulous notes. I work nights, he explained. 4 years, I've seen you hustle in and out, always alone. I figured someone ought to keep track. Flipping through the pages, a mix of horror and elation washed over me, dates, times, and proof I was real, effectively trapped in shadows. Your brother was in Aspen the weekend he claimed to complete that project, Martin revealed. Suddenly, I felt seen. Why are you helping me? I asked, emotion tightening my voice. He merely shrugged, a man who'd simply had enough. I've watched them steal from you for too long. Plus, my wife works in R&D. She shouts your name as the lifeblood of the company. Clutching the notebook, I felt its weight symbolize hope and empowerment. Thank you, I managed to say, trying to keep my composure. Make them listen, he urged, stepping aside as we continued on our mission, the notebook in my hand a potent reminder. As I entered the main hall, there was my father, a picture of elegance on stage. Bright lights painted him as the perfect king. In the front row, Veronica radiated an aura of misplaced confidence, and Landon was already rehearsing his speech like a kid with an endless monologue. I lingered behind the curtain, the announcer's voice calling out my father's name, and the applause thundered, filling the space with anticipation. Then, striding onto the stage, I felt sheer chaos ensue. Gasps echoed through the ballroom, my father's plastered smile fell in an instant, Veronica looked shocked as if I'd slapped her with a fish, and Landon went a shade paler than a ghost's sheet. What "What are you doing here?" he stuttered, a mix of disbelief and anger painting his face. "Well, Dad, it seems the last piece of the puzzle just found its place. Time for some truth." Richard's voice squeaked through the microphone, but I was calm and ready with my own. As I spoke, the tension in the hall could have been sliced with a knife. "Good morning," I announced. He tried to hush me, claiming it was inappropriate, but I fired back. Seriously, who would declare someone incompetent when they were knocked out cold? Not to mention, how could he attempt to cut his own daughter out of her company, leaving her helpless in a hospital bed? A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. The tide was turning. I whipped out the folded note I'd discovered beside my bed, displaying it like a trump card. "We stopped paying. Good luck." A few gasps echoed in the audience as I placed it on the podium. With unshakable resolve, I revealed that I had activated my mother's trust. Daniel, the trusty sidekick, handed over the documents while Ethan primed the presentation. Suddenly, the backdrop lit up with the incorporation papers, proudly naming Julia Hayes as the majority owner. Parents would have been proud. This was a real reveal. In reaction, my father lunged at the podium. "That information is private," he barked. "But you know what?" I had the calmness of a Zen master as I shot back. "No, it's true." The board members leaned forward, the journalists scribbled feverishly, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Then I opened Martin's notebook, displaying the evidence kept by an impartial observer, someone who'd seen every ugly detail my father wished to bury. Locks of determination secured my gaze on my father. For once, he looked like a mere mortal. "You've forgotten who I really am," I whispered. The weight of my mother's legacy filled the room. Just then, a board member raised their hand, and I seized the moment, pushing for an immediate vote of no confidence. Hands shot up across the room like daisies in spring. It didn't take long, barely 5 minutes, before the board stripped my father of his authority, leaving him frozen in place, eyes glued to the floor. Veronica's expression morphed into a grimace, her facade crumbling. Landon's bravado also seemed to evaporate as I backed away from the MIC, the wild applause not just for me but for the truth finally taking center stage. It felt like I had just run a marathon and emerged breathing and victorious. More than just the applause, I felt vibrancy coursing through me. For the first time since waking up, I actually felt alive. As the board adjourned, the room emptied slowly, as if everyone was tiptoeing around the remnants of my family drama. Each step echoed like a reminder of what had just happened, an intense courtroom drama, classic family betrayal, unfolding right before our very eyes. I took a deep breath, knowing that the fight, while fierce, had ignited a flame of righteousness that couldn't easily be extinguished. Life was back, and I was ready to take it on. Richard remained seated in the front row long after the meeting ended, a solitary figure amidst the empty chairs. Not a single soul ventured over. Veronica, Landon, they all vacated like a flock of startled birds. Landon slunk away first, his shoulders hunched as if he were trying to hide from the disapproving glances directed his way. And I said nothing, opting instead for the profound silence that lingered like a thick fog. What could be said when the dust had finally settled? As Daniel and Ethan flanked me in the quiet corridor behind the stage, I felt the tension that had kept my spine in a perpetual state of rigidity begin to release. Victory didn't quite capture the moment. It was more like a long-overdue reunion with what was rightfully mine. My mother's legacy, my work, and quite frankly, my space at the table had returned to me, and wow, did it feel good. That evening, the board convened an emergency session that would shake things up. They swiped Richard, Veronica, and Landon from their positions like an angry referee tossing players from the game. Landon found himself relegated to a junior analytics role. Oh, the irony. Just a few years prior, I had walked that very same path. Maybe he'd finally grasp what real effort actually feels like. Poor guy. Then there was me and my newfound position. It came with my mother's old title and seat, and I felt the weight of it settle gently on my shoulders. No raucous celebrations, though. I accepted it quietly, in that straight-laced way Mom used to. It was a solemn recognition of what she had cultivated, passed down through the trials, triumphs, and tribulations that defined her legacy. When I finally touched down in Seattle, I detoured right to the hospital room. My room, once a battleground of emotions, now felt strangely transformed. The machines had vanished, the sheets were renewed, and yet, oh, that memory of waking up alone still curled around my throat a bit, an unwelcome guess. But this time, the atmosphere brimmed with something far more comforting as I gazed out the window. The dreary sky hung over our city, the very place my mother had fiercely defended. "I did it, Mom," I whispered, a little quiver in my voice. "I set things right." In an unexpected twist, I felt her spirit there, unwavering and proud, a comforting presence amidst the chaos of my life. If the walls could echo, they would have joined in my triumphant declaration. In the following weeks, I unraveled wisdom my father never grasped. Silence isn't a sign of weakness, it's fertile ground where truth can flourish. I hadn't obliterated my family, I merely drew the line, refusing to let them trample on my worth any longer. What emerged from the upheaval wasn't vengeance, it bore the sweet fruit of restoration, a homage to my mother's legacy. It stood tall and proud, exactly as she had envisioned it. Ever battled for something that once belonged to you? Share your own stories. And if you're a fan of these little epics of reclaiming hope, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on the next adventure.